The gloves were signed by Mike Tyson himself. To Marcus, keep punching, little champion. Iron Mike. But Coach Tommy Sullivan didn't see the autograph when 12-year-old Cus D'Amato walked into his boxing gym. He saw a black kid from the wrong side of town who probably couldn't afford the membership fees, so he turned him away, never knowing that he'd just refused to train the son of the man who created Iron Mike Tyson's legendary peekaboo style. Some bloodlines run deeper than prejudice, and some mistakes cost more than a career. The mistake that would destroy Tommy Sullivan's 30-year coaching career began at exactly 4:15 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon when the bell above Sullivan's boxing academy chimed, announcing another visitor. Tommy looked up from wrapping his hands and saw exactly what he expected to see: trouble. Cus D'Amato stood in the doorway clutching a worn gym bag that had seen better days, his eyes wide with the kind of wonder that only comes from a dream finally within reach. At 12 years old, he was small for his age, all elbows and knees in clothes that were clean but clearly second-hand. His sneakers had holes near the toes, and his jeans were rolled up to hide the fact that they were too long. But what Tommy Sullivan saw was different. He saw a black kid who didn't belong in his gym, a kid from the projects who probably had gang affiliations, who would bring drugs and violence into his pristine training facility. Tommy had built Sullivan's boxing academy over 3 decades into one of the most respected gyms in Chicago, and he wasn't about to let some street kid ruin his reputation. What Tommy couldn't see, wouldn't allow himself to see, were the details that mattered. The way Marcus's eyes immediately tracked to the heavy bags with the hunger of someone who understood their purpose. The unconscious way he shifted his weight onto the balls of his feet, already adopting a fighter's stance. The reverent way he looked at the championship belts displayed on the walls, not with greed, but with the pure admiration of someone who understood what they represented. "We're closed, kid," Tommy called out from behind the front desk, not bothering to look up from his paperwork. "Come back tomorrow." Marcus took a tentative step forward, his voice small but determined. "Actually, sir, I called yesterday about boxing lessons. My dad paid the registration fee over the phone." Tommy finally looked up, and his expression hardened. This was worse than he'd thought. The kid actually believed he belonged here. "Listen, son," Tommy said, his tone carrying the false patience of someone who dealt with unwanted visitors regularly. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. This gym has very specific requirements for membership." "Requirements?" Marcus asked, genuinely confused. "But I brought my physical form and my dad said the payment went through." Tommy stood up slowly, using his full height and bulk to intimidate. At 55, he was still an imposing figure, 6 feet 2 inches of muscle gone slightly soft, with hands that could still crush a man's grip, and a voice that had shouted instructions over the noise of dozens of training sessions. His gray hair was cropped military short, and his eyes held the cold assessment of someone who had learned to judge people quickly and, in his mind, accurately. "Kid, let me explain something to you," Tommy said, walking around the desk to tower over Marcus. "This isn't some community center where anyone can just walk in off the street. We train serious fighters here, champions, people with discipline, dedication, and," he paused, letting his eyes make an obvious assessment of Marcus's appearance, "the right kind of background." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach, but he pressed on. His father had taught him never to back down from something he wanted, especially when he knew he belonged. "Sir, I've been training at home for 2 years. My dad taught me the basics, and I know I can work hard. I just need someone to teach me proper technique." Tommy laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Your dad taught you? Let me guess. He watches boxing on TV and thinks that makes him a trainer?" The other fighters in the gym had stopped their workouts to watch the exchange. Tommy was known for his cutting remarks, but there was something particularly cruel in his voice today. "Actually," Marcus said quietly, reaching into his gym bag, "my dad used to train professional fighters. He gave me these to bring." Marcus pulled out a pair of red Everlast boxing gloves, and even from across the room, Tommy could see they were vintage, probably worth serious money to a collector. But what he couldn't see from his position was the signature scrawled across the left glove in black marker. Tommy's expression grew more dismissive. "Kid, I don't care if your dad bought you expensive gloves from some pawn shop. This gym requires a certain level of commitment and, frankly, a certain type of client. We cater to families who understand the tradition and discipline of boxing, not kids who think they can fight their way out of whatever situation they're running from." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. He'd been so excited about finally training at a real gym, about learning from a coach who had trained champions. He'd practiced his introduction in the mirror for weeks, imagining how impressed the coach would be with his dedication and knowledge of the sport. "I'm not running from anything," Marcus said, his voice stronger now. "I love boxing. I study every fight I can find online. I know about Sugar Ray Robinson and Muhammad Ali and Roberto Duran. I practice combinations every night in my room. This isn't just some phase. This is what I want to do with my life." Tommy rolled his eyes. Every kid thinks they want to be a boxer until they get hit in the face for the first time. The difference is, some kids have the character and upbringing to push through that moment, and others, this gym has a reputation to maintain. The implication hung in the air like toxic smoke. Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes, but he blinked them back. His father had taught him that real fighters don't cry, especially not in front of people who want to see them fail. "Please," Marcus tried one more time, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just give me a chance. One training session. I'll prove I belong here." Tommy's expression softened slightly, but not with compassion, with pity, which was somehow worse. "Listen, kid, I'm sure you're a good athlete. Try basketball or football. Sports that are more suited to your natural abilities. Boxing requires a different kind of discipline, a different kind of mental toughness. It's not about being tough on the streets. It's about being smart, strategic, controlled." Marcus felt something break inside his chest. Not his spirit. That was made of stronger stuff. But his faith in adults, in the idea that hard work and passion would be enough to earn respect. "My dad said boxing was about heart," Marcus said quietly. "He said it didn't matter where you came from, or what you looked like. He said it only mattered how much you were willing to sacrifice to be great." "Your dad sounds like a dreamer," Tommy replied dismissively. "This is the real world, kid. In the real world, certain people belong in certain places, and this place isn't for you." That's when Marcus did something that would haunt Tommy Sullivan for the rest of his life. He held up the signed boxing gloves so Tommy could see the inscription clearly. "To Marcus, keep punching, little champion. Iron Mike." Tommy squinted at the gloves, and for the first time uncertainty crept into his expression. The signature looked authentic, but that was impossible. How would some street kid from the projects have gloves signed by one of the greatest heavyweight champions in history? "Where did you get those?" Tommy asked, his voice losing some of its confident dismissal. "Mike Tyson gave them to me last Christmas," Marcus said simply. "He comes to dinner sometimes. My dad trained him when he was starting his comeback a few years ago." Tommy laughed, but the sound was nervous now. "Kid, I don't know what kind of fantasy you're living in, but Mike Tyson doesn't have dinner with random people, and he certainly doesn't give personal gifts to kids from," he gestured vaguely at Marcus's appearance, "from families like mine," Marcus finished quietly. Tommy's face flushed red. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to," Marcus replied, and there was something in his voice, a dignity and composure that seemed far beyond his 12 years, that made several of the other fighters stop what they were doing to listen. Marcus carefully placed the gloves back in his bag and zipped it up. "My father's name is Cus D'Amato Jr., he said quietly. "He trained Mike Tyson, and before that he learned from his father, who discovered Mike and taught him everything he knew about boxing. My dad has been training champions for 20 years, and he taught me that batting was supposed to be about heart and determination, not about judging people before you know who they are." The name hit Tommy like a physical blow. Cus D'Amato. Every serious boxing fan knew that name. Cus D'Amato had been a legendary trainer, the man who transformed a troubled kid from Brooklyn into Iron Mike Tyson. But that was impossible. Cus Sr. had died years ago, and his legacy had been carried on by Tommy's blood went cold as the pieces clicked into place. Cus D'Amato Jr., the trainer who had worked with Tyson during his comeback attempts. The man whose training techniques were studied in boxing academies around the world. The coach who commanded respect from everyone in the boxing community. That's not possible, Tommy stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. Marcus shouldered his gym bag and headed toward the door. You're right about one thing, Coach Sullivan. This gym does have standards, and after meeting you, I don't think they're the kind of standards my family would want to be associated with. As Marcus reached the door, he turned back one last time. My dad always told me that great trainers could see potential in anyone, regardless of what they looked like or where they came from. He said that's what made them great. I guess he was wrong about you. The door closed behind Marcus with a soft chime, leaving Tommy standing in the middle of his gym with the growing realization that he'd just made the most catastrophic mistake of his career. Around the gym, the other fighters were staring at him with expressions ranging from confusion to disgust. Coach, one of them said quietly, wasn't that Cus D'Amato's kid? Tommy didn't answer. He was too busy calculating how quickly news of this incident would spread through the boxing community. Cus D'Amato Jr. wasn't just any trainer, he was boxing royalty. And Tommy had just humiliated his son based on nothing more than racial prejudice and assumptions about economic status. Outside the gym, Marcus sat on the steps, finally allowing himself to cry. Not because of Tommy Sullivan's words, he'd heard worse from kids at school and adults on the street, but because he'd been so excited to train at a real gym, to learn from someone other than his father, to prove that he had what it took to follow in the family tradition. His phone buzzed with a text from his dad. How did it go, champ? Ready to show me what you learned? Marcus stared at the message for a long time before typing back, I think I learned something different than what you were expecting. 20 minutes later, a black Mercedes pulled up in front of Sullivan's boxing academy. Chu stepped out of the car with the quiet confidence of a man who had trained world champions and commanded respect in every boxing gym from New York to Las Vegas. At 52, he was still in excellent shape, with the sharp eyes of someone who could assess a fighter's potential in seconds and the calm demeanor of someone who had seen everything the sport had to offer. But today, those calm eyes held a cold anger that would have made Iron Mike Tyson take a step back. The bell above the door chimed as Cus walked into Sullivan's boxing academy, and every conversation in the gym stopped. Tommy Sullivan looked up from his conversation with another trainer and felt his stomach drop to his feet. Cus, Tommy said, his voice cracking slightly. What brings you here? Cus D'Amato Jr. didn't smile. He didn't shake hands. He simply stood in the middle of the gym and said, in a voice that carried to every corner of the room, I believe you met my son today. The silence that followed was deafening. Every fighter, every trainer, every person in that gym understood immediately what had happened. Tommy Sullivan, one of Chicago's most prominent boxing coaches, had just revealed himself to be the kind of person that the sport was supposed to rise above. Cus, I had no idea, Tommy started, but Cus held up a hand to stop him. No idea about what, Tommy? That my son was worthy of respect, that he deserved to be judged on his character rather than his skin color. That boxing was supposed to be about heart and determination rather than prejudice and assumptions. Tommy's face had gone pale. Around the gym, phones were already coming out. This conversation would be recorded, shared, and discussed in boxing circles for years to come. Made a mistake, Tommy said weakly. You made a choice, Cus corrected. You looked at a 12-year-old boy who loves this sport more than anything in the world, and you decided he didn't belong here because he was black. That's not a mistake, Tommy. That's who you are. The words hit Tommy like a combination punch to the body and head. He staggered backward, reaching for his desk to steady himself. Cus, please, Tommy tried again. If I had known who he was, if you had known who he was, you would have treated him differently. Cus interrupted. But you should have treated him with respect regardless of who his father was. That's what boxing is supposed to teach us. That it doesn't matter where you come from, only where you're willing to go. Cus walked over to the championship belts displayed on Tommy's wall, studying them with the eye of someone who had coached fighters to similar victories. You know, Tommy, I've been in this sport for 25 years. I've trained champions, worked with legends, seen the best and worst of what boxing has to offer, and I've learned one thing that seems to have escaped you." He turned back to Tommy, his eyes blazing with controlled fury. "The greatest fighters in history have come from every background imaginable. Muhammad Ali, from Louisville; Roberto Duran, from the slums of Panama; Mike Tyson, from the streets of Brooklyn; Sugar Ray Robinson, from the projects of Detroit. They all had one thing in common: they were hungry. They wanted something more than what the world told them they could have." Tommy stood frozen, unable to speak. "My son has that hunger," Cus continued. "He's been training since he was old enough to hold his hands up. He studies film, practices combinations, understands technique and strategy better than kids twice his age. He has the bloodline, the training, and most importantly, the heart. And you threw him out because you couldn't see past your own prejudices." Cus walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back one last time. "Tommy, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that you had the chance to train the next generation of the D'Amato boxing legacy, and you threw it away because you're a racist. That decision is going to follow you for the rest of your career." As Cus left the gym, Tommy Sullivan realized that his reputation, 30 years of building respect in the boxing community, had just been destroyed in less than 10 minutes. And the worst part was, he'd done it to himself. The next morning, the video had already started circulating on social media. Tommy's conversation with Marcus, secretly recorded by one of the gym members who had been disgusted by what he witnessed. The boxing community's response was swift and brutal. Legendary promoter Don King released a statement: "There is no place in boxing for the kind of prejudice displayed by Tommy Sullivan." Former heavyweight champion Evander Holyfield tweeted, "Boxing is about heart, not color." Tommy Sullivan forgot what this sport stands for. ESPN ran a feature about discrimination in boxing gyms across America, using Tommy's incident as a prime example of what needed to change. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. Mike Tyson himself released a video statement. "I heard about what happened to little Cus D'Amato, and I want to say something to that coach who turned him away. Marcus is family to me. Cus Jr. helped me when I was trying to make my comeback, and Marcus is like a nephew. That boy has more heart and potential in his little finger than most fighters have in their entire body. And any coach who can't see that because of the color of his skin doesn't deserve to train fighters. Boxing is supposed to be the ultimate meritocracy, where your fists and your heart matter more than anything else. People like Tommy Sullivan are everything that's wrong with the sport." The video went viral within hours, racking up millions of views and effectively ending Tommy Sullivan's career as a respected boxing trainer. Within 2 weeks, Sullivan's boxing academy had lost over half its membership. Parents pulled their kids out, citing concerns about the gym's values and leadership. Sponsors withdrew their support. The gym's landlord, facing pressure from the community, chose not to renew Tommy's lease. But the real justice came in a different form. 3 months later, the D'Amato Boxing Academy opened just 2 miles from Sullivan's former location. Cus D'Amato Jr. had decided to open his own gym, dedicating it to training young fighters from all backgrounds who demonstrated heart, determination, and respect for the sport. Marcus was his first student and his first champion. 6 months after the incident, Marcus won the Chicago Golden Gloves Championship in his age group, using the same peekaboo style that had made Mike Tyson famous. In his victory speech, he thanked his father, his training partners, and everyone who believed in me when others couldn't see past what I looked like. Tommy Sullivan watched the fight on television from his new job as a security guard at a mall across town. He'd lost his gym, his reputation, and his livelihood because of 10 minutes of prejudice. He thought about calling to congratulate Marcus, but he knew his call wouldn't be welcome. Instead, he sat alone in his apartment, surrounded by the boxing memorabilia that represented 30 years of achievement, and wondered how he'd let prejudice override everything he'd claimed to believe about the sport he loved. The last news Tommy heard about Marcus came a year later. The kid had been invited to train with the U.S. Olympic development team, the youngest fighter ever selected for the program. The headline read, D'Amato legacy continues. 13-year-old prodigy follows family tradition. In the article, Marcus was quoted saying, "My father taught me that boxing is about more than winning fights. It's about proving that heart and determination can overcome any obstacle, including people who try to tell you that you don't belong. Every time I step in the ring, I'm fighting for every kid who's been told they're not good enough because of where they come from or what they look like." At the bottom of the article was a small note. Marcus D'Amato trains at D'Amato Boxing Academy, which offers scholarships for underprivileged youth and has a strict anti-discrimination policy. Tommy folded the newspaper and put it away. Some mistakes, he'd learned, cost more than just a career. Some mistakes cost you the chance to be part of something greater than yourself. And some mistakes teach you that character matters more than anything else. A lesson that Tommy Sullivan learned far too late. If you believe that talent and heart matter more than prejudice, that everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves regardless of their background, and that the greatest victories come not from destroying others, but from overcoming the obstacles they put in your way, then this story matters. Because in the end, Marcus D'Amato proved that the greatest champions aren't just made in gyms, they're forged by the challenges that try to break them, and refined by the grace with which they rise above those who try to hold them down.